welcome everyone. I guess we'll get started. I'm here just to introduce our wonderful next speaker. I won't be telling you too much about anything technical. Without further ado, first of all, welcome everyone to the CHYE. It's been a quiet summer. We haven't had that many events, but now this is the first after the summer, and we'll be having a few more coming up. I guess after the holidays, right? We'll be having some more cool happenings, things that are going to happen here. Take notice that we just put out some papers on the table about the opening of the business lounge. We'll bring out some more over here. And without further ado, we're going to call on
Hi. I want to thank you guys all for coming out. And, it's late. I know it's hard after a long day to schlep out and pay attention. So I'm going to try to make it as interesting as possible and hopefully funny as possible if I can. So the question really is, right, why do we have corporations in America? Why do we have incorporated corporations, limited liability companies? Why do you hear these words that are thrown around? This is a very big subject. People spend their whole life just studying corporations, or just studying limited liability companies. There's actually teams of attorneys and accountants who that's all they'll do. So obviously I'm not going to be able to give you a in-depth, not that I even have it to give, but an in-depth understanding or a review. But what I'd like to do is kind of give you a general insight into why, the underpinnings of why everything is the way it is, and then kind of you'll be able to intuit, be able to figure it out, just by thinking rationally about some of the questions you might have on what the best thing to do for yourself. So let's talk a little bit about how corporations came about. How did companies come about? Well, they came about pretty simply. There was a whole bunch of very, very wealthy people sitting around, and they were bemoaning the fact, they were upset that they had just been sued, and they invested in wheat, they invested in purchasing flour, oil. It didn't matter what it was, but this happened all over the country. It happened in England, it happened in France. And they spent an immense amount of money purchasing their product. And then lo and behold, they ended up losing everything. And not only did they lose the 50, 60, 70 million dollars they put into the investment, now they were being sued personally, and they were at risk to lose their homes, to lose other investments. They were doing great, right? So they purchased corn. They spent $10 million on corn. They spent $10 million on oil. All of a sudden, the market, the bottom of the market came out of corn. It fell. The price dropped to the floor, and oil went up 50%. So they lose the $10 million they put into corn. Then the money they put into oil, now they're going to lose that too. So they had to come up with a way to avoid that unhappy occurrence. So they all got together, and they were obviously wealthy and powerful, and they were part of the government, because the wealthy generally are attracted to government positions. It's a chicken or the egg. And they figured out a simple scheme. They said, well, we can pass any law we want. So why don't we pass a law that says very simply that there can be a separate, distinct entity that can be created, which will be separate from us. And then in that entity, in that firm, in that business, it'll be recognized by the government. We'll put our investment into this entity, into this vehicle. And if something happens to the vehicle, something happens to the corporation, they won't be able to come after us personally. So they went to the legislature, they went to the government, and they said, please pass laws so that the courts will recognize it. The courts will be forced to not take our money when we invest badly, when we make a mistake or something happens out of our power. So using their political clout and their know-how, they essentially crafted laws which created a distinct and separate entity from them that they were capable of putting their money into, capable of getting money back from, but essentially would be a protection from them. So this really starts off the whole conversation. What a corporation? What an LLC? What businesses? You hear online, Best Buy, it's a corporation. You hear about Amazon, it's a limited liability company. You hear about all these great businesses. why are they doing this? Why don't wealthy people just take their money and invest it, and then they make the money, they get it back? What's the whole reason? So now we understand the reason why they're doing this is because they want protection from anybody, God forbid, coming after their money that they don't put in the business. They understand. Listen, I put $1 million in Amazon. I invested $1 million in Amazon. Amazon then buys books. If there's a fire and the whole building burns, my $1 million will go up in smoke. But they won't be able to come after my house. They won't be able to come to my bank account, because after all, this business is separate from me. It's a distinct, separate person. So the first question on our what's called on the handout is, I have a great idea. What's the next step? Well, the next step is, do not run and open up a corporation. What you really have to find out is whether or not your company is capable of making revenue, capable of making profit, and not one-off profit. It's not a question of, I was able to get my hands on 500 phones, and I was able to sell it. I bought it for $1, I sold it for $10, I made all this money, I need to run and open up a corporation. That's not a good idea. Why? Because although a corporation provides you with a real protection, it's armor plating from personally coming into your pocket and taking your money, it also has a downside to it. One of the downsides is that you have an obligation to keep track of all your records. You have an obligation to pay certain insurance for your employees. You have all these additional obligations that we're going to get into, and the downside for those obligations really makes it problematic to run out and open up a corporation without really giving this some thought. A lot of people come into the office and they'll sit down and they'll say, I got a great idea, help me open up a corporation. My first question I want to know is, can we wait 30 days? Can we get back together in 30 days? Why wait 30 days? I have a great idea. I said, because in 30 days, there's a 90% chance you won't want to open up the company. Because that's the way it is. Opening up a corporation is a huge responsibility. Just because you've made money today doesn't mean that you're going to be able to create an entity that's an ongoing concern that's capable of consistently making income. And you can open up this corporation, and closing a corporation with New York State is no fun. Closing a corporation is quite hard, complicated, can be quite expensive. So people running out to open up corporations are doing themselves a major disservice, and they can really hurt themselves. So the first thing you have to do is ascertain, figure out. You have to sit down and see whether or not my business idea is capable of making money, whether or not it's going to consistently make money, and whether or not I want to make this huge step and incur this additional risk. Some of the things, next question, what do I need to consider before opening a business? Well, one of the things you have to consider before opening a business is whether or not, there's many things. Obviously, I can't cover all of them, but one of the major things you really want to sit down and think about is whether or not you want to have investors in your business. A lot of times people will come to me and say, I got a great idea. I want to sell chicken. I'm going to cook it. No one else is cooking it. It's a special product. I'm going to make a lot of money. Let's open up a corporation. So you have to ask yourself a question. Do you want to fund your investment yourself? Do you want to take your savings, or your mother or your father give you a small loan? Or do you want to bring in a partner who's a savvy investor, somebody who's done businesses before? Perhaps you and your friend have come up with an idea. Do you want to come? So the first thing you really want to ask yourself, do I or do I not want to have an investor? Now, the next thing is DBA, LLC, S Corp, Inc. Which is best for me? So that you hear it thrown out all the time. I'm a limited liability company. What does that mean? I'm a corporation. Or you see INC, incorporate, INC period. So the difference between a DBA, an LLC, and a corporation, I want to take notes, is a DBA, a person is not opening up a company. He's just going down, and I have a copy here. If everyone will turn to page, that looks like this. So you come up with a good idea. You've come and you've met with an attorney. You've spoken to an accountant. You've decided that incorporating your company right now. Actually, opening a corporation is not a good idea. So all you want to do is you want to start doing business, but you do not want all the additional responsibilities of opening up a corporation. So but you don't want to do business in your own name. My name is Chaim Yankel. I don't want the whole world to know that Chaim Yankel is selling phones. So what I want to do is I want to put a name between me and the public. So that's called a DBA, or an assumed name. You can actually get an assumed name. It's not that expensive. In New York County, the filing fee is $100. You have to go down to the court, 60 Central Street. You file the paperwork. They have the paperwork down there. It's very easy. Ask the clerk. They'll be more than happy to help you. You don't have to be an attorney. You're not in a company. And once you have this DBA, you can then go down to the bank and say, I want to open up an account, a business account. My business account is going to be a DBA. It's not going to say Chaim Yankel. Business account is going to say Cellular Unlimited.
You have to have a DBA?
No, you don't. But let's say you decide not to open up a corporation, but you don't want everyone to know that you're selling cell phones. So you'd like to put a little bit of room between you and the public. So you can go down and get a DBA. You don't have to open up a corporation. You go down to, in this case, is New York County. New York County is Manhattan. We're in Queens. But let's say you're going to be located in New York County. You would be able to do this. And you'd be able to open up a bank account. You get checks. It would say Cellular Unlimited. You wouldn't have all the additional responsibilities. You don't have all the worries of opening up a corporation. So that's what doing business as. You're doing it as yourself, but you're allowed to have a name. You're hiding behind a name.
Is there any other benefit of doing business as besides that?
There are some benefits of doing business as, and one of them, namely, is ultimately a lower tax burden, possibly, depending on how your accountant sets it up. Okay, so DBA, the name, assumed name, is also used and thrown around. And a DBA is not a bad idea. A lot of times you don't want the worry and the hassle of opening up a corporation. Now the government knows that you're the CEO. If there's ever an issue with the corporation, they're going to call you. You don't want that problem, so you're going to do a DBA. We'll start as a DBA, and then later on, what's the problem with doing a DBA? To go back to the beginning of our conversation, right? The problem is the personal liability. So you sell what's called your cellular phones. You sell what's called you sell 1,000 phones. You make $1,000. You're very, very happy. All of a sudden, you find out that one of your phones, the battery blew someone's ear off. So now they're going to come after you personally, and they're going to have to take whatever bank money you have in the bank. Now, for a lot of people in this room, perhaps this is not really an issue. We don't have huge assets. Whatever money we have, we generally live on. We don't have. Some of us may have homes, or may or may not have homes. And even if we do have homes, we may not have equity, which is value in the home, which is cash. So a lot of times I'll explain this concept to somebody, and they'll say, listen, if they come after me, what do I care? I'll just file bankruptcy. I think that's a risky thing to do, because you never really know when you're going to be profitable. Business, one thing about business, if I could take just 30 seconds, I'm not a business expert, I'm not a business guru, but I have been watching people trying to open up businesses. And business is a roller coaster. I've never met one person who's come to the door and said, I had a great idea, I invested $10,000, I purchased the product, I sold the product, now I have $150,000, it's 2 years later. It's been a straight from line A to B, it's been a direct line, there's been no ups and downs. It doesn't happen that way. So life, right, there's ups and downs. And you may not be profitable 1 month, you may be profitable the next. You may not know what's going to happen. So a DBA is not a bad idea, but it's something you really have to consider and ask yourself whether or not you want to take on that responsibility.
So DBA doesn't provide protection against it?
So DBA provides you zero protection. It's just you doing business, you as an individual doing business as another person. That's your name, Cellular Unlimited.
Is that the same as a sole proprietor? That's like a sole proprietor.
It's also called a sole proprietor, correct? Okay, so let's go on to limited liability companies. So for our purposes, there are many types of business entities, but ultimately there are only two entities which we want to deal with here, and that is limited liability companies or Incs. And those are the two questions most business owners, small business owners, are going to ask themselves. Should I open up an S Corp? Should I open up a limited liability company? Well, the difference between a limited liability company and an S Corp for purposes of protection are ultimately zero. There's no difference. An LLC provides 100% protection against personal liability, provided you don't do anything stupid. That's going to be the key word, you don't do anything stupid. And a corp, something which is INC, is going to provide you unlimited protection, provided you don't do anything stupid. And that's really the key word.
You say limited, what does limited mean?
That's just the name of the entity. It's called Limited Liability Corporation. Right. If you want to switch, you want to go to page, it says Certificate of Incorporation. It is 14 pages in, 13, 14 pages in. It the certificate of incorporation of, and it has insert corporate name. The 14-page name. So I want to open up a corporation. I decided that's what I want to do. I don't want to open up LLC. How do I do it? Well, you don't have to go to LegalZoom.com. You don't have to call an attorney. You can do it yourself. It's very simple. Google's your best friend. Type in certificate of incorporation, business, New York State, NYS. This will pop up. First name, Cellular Unlimited. The name of the corporation, Cellular Unlimited, Inc., comma, Inc. You have to make sure to put the INC. Write that down if you plan on doing it. The county that you're going to be in, we live in Kings County, right? Kings County. The amount of shares, you see it says 200, no par value already. The reason why is because under New York State law, you can have up to 200 shares for free. That means you have to pay $10 of tax when you open up your corporation, and up to 200 shares are included in the $10. So you want to leave that as 200. I know I'm going fast, but we'll come back. Fifth, Secretary of State. Next page. Next page. Next page.
No, if you have a business, like you're an LLC, do you need a certificate of incorporation?
Well, I'm going to get there in a
Or an
second.
article, or,
Incorporated.
An article of organization.
Incorporation. The next page is incorporator information required. Signatures you're going to sign. Your name, your address, your city. Filed by will be you again. Let's go back 2 pages quickly. Google's your best friend. You type in fax filing form, New York State. It'll show you this form online. This is all fillable. You can type it in. At the top, you write in Cellular Unlimited, Inc. Filing of documents and certificates. First box, you check it. How much do you have to pay? Well, $135. If you look at 3 pages subsequent, the subsequent 3 pages, it'll say at the bottom, it says total of $135. It's the third to last line at the bottom. And I'm kind of running, but I'm just trying to show you very simply that you can open up a corporation yourself. You don't need to pay LegalZoom. You don't need to hire an attorney. You don't need to. I mean, asking an accountant to open up a corporation, having them do it, is a violation of the law because they're not allowed to practice state law. So asking an accountant to help you open up a corporation is not the best idea. The best idea is probably to get him to tell you how to do it yourself, and you do it yourself, so you don't create any problems for him or yourself later on. Okay, so I'm just showing you very quickly. This is how you open up a corporation. Go to the next page. I'm not going to show it to you now, but you can do it on your own time. But it's the same thing. There's a form for an LLC. How to do it? Again, fax filing form is right there in the packet. You can see it. You put the information. Don't pay for expedited service. Fax it in. Don't pay for expedited service. The reason why you don't pay for expedited service is if you make a mistake and you pay for expedited service, they keep the money. Don't pay for expedited service. They'll teach you how to do it if you make a mistake. Don't feel bad. It's your tax dollars that works. All right, so let's just quickly go to page 2. These are a whole bunch of questions that go into corporations. I know I'm kind of running, and you'll have a chance to ask any questions, but this is going to be a quick topical overview, and we'll explain a lot of this stuff. It's going to focus on S corporations and LLCs. So let's just back up 2 seconds and kind of frame this. I have a business idea. I bought a product. I've made money. I want to hire Bob Himes. I want to hire someone. I know that hiring somebody is going to be a little bit of an issue if I don't have a corporation. How do I pay him? Do I pay him out of my own pocket? It becomes a little bit of a problem. Also, at the beginning when I started this company, I had a few $100s, but I managed to turn it into a few $1,000s. Looks like this is viable. I'm selling stuff on Amazon. I'm selling stuff on Google. I'm starting to make some money. I'm thinking maybe I should incorporate. I know it's going to cost me a little bit more, but at least I won't have to worry that anyone's going to take the money that I've already earned out of my pocket. Also, how do I pay somebody? How do I hire someone? So I'm going to open a corporation. So now you know opening a corporation is a very easy thing to do. You get a fax filing form. You type in the information. You fill out the articles of incorporation. Fax it in. Corporation will be open within 24 hours. So let's talk a little bit about the difference between an S corporation and a C corporation. A corporation for purposes of state law is a corporation. What do I mean? If you see INC at the end of a name, or you see CORP, period, at the end of a name, that just means that some state somewhere has recognized this entity as distinct and separate from the shareholders. It's distinct and separate from the CEO, distinct and separate from the president, right? For state law, there's no difference between a C Corp and S Corp. You'll hear it thrown around. C Corp, S Corp, it's just to make you Michigan. It doesn't mean anything. For purposes of state law, it's a corporation or it's a limited liability corporation. It's a partnership or limited liability. I'm not going into partnerships because partnerships are a whole other bag of worms, and it frankly wouldn't, just a waste of time. It wouldn't help you. If you're going to open up a corporation, you open up a company, your best bet is to stick with an S Corp or what's called an LLC. And if you want to know why, maybe at the next workshop that I give, I'll delve into it. Okay, so what is an S corporation, right? See our question? So an S corporation is a corporation that has made a request for special tax treatment with the federal authorities or New York State tax authorities. So you hear people throw around S corporation, C corporation. Well, what's the difference between a C corporation and S corporation? Well, I'll tell you right now. An S corporation is a corporation where the president of the company asks the federal government, please give me S corporation status. And the form to request S corporation status is the fourth to last page, or fifth to last page in the handout, I believe. It's very simple again. Find it, Google's your friend. Google IRS form 2848. It's fillable. You fill it in, you mail it in, you get a letter a few weeks later. No problem. Once you get that letter that says that you're recognized as an S corporation, you have to ask the state of New York to recognize you as an S corporation. So the third to last page in this handout is the form that you have to file. It's called CT6. Very simple form to file. I'm sorry, it's the last form. Again, it's fillable. Google's your friend. Type in CT6, New York State. The only thing about the CT6 is you have to get the letter from the federal government saying that we recognize you as an S corporation before you file New York State's request to recognize an S corporation. Okay, what is a limited liability company? A limited liability company is a business entity that can be formed by one or more persons or other business entities. So once an LLC is formed, the LLC, which is a distinct entity, right? It's like another person altogether for legal purposes. The LLC then enters into all the contracts. So I open up a company and I want to rent this, not obviously the show, I want to rent the unit next door because I need to store my phones. So I get to the landlord and he says, I would be more than happy to rent it to you, but I need 2 months security. You say, you want 2 months security? Why? Well, you're a new company, I really know. I said, okay, fine. I'll give you 2 months security, but one condition. I want the lease to be 100% in the corporation's name. It should say Cellular Unlimited, Inc. I don't want it to say Yossel Bialstar. Why don't I? Because it's 6 months down the road, I have to leave this unit, and I've got to go, and either the money's run out or for whatever reason, the business is not viable. I don't want him to come and sue me personally for all the outstanding rent. He can only come after the LLC. What the good news is the LLC probably won't have any money at that point because the LLC, right, it has to pay wages, it has to pay these things which are bona fide expenses, and they're not going to be subject to the landlord grabbing them back later on. So you want the LLC, everything done in the LLC. It says professional corporations, you can ignore that. How do I form an S corporation? You start by forming a regular business corporation. The formation of a corporation requires the filing of a certificate of incorporation. I showed everyone that, right? With the New York State Department of State. There's no such thing as a federal corporation. I get this all the time, and it drives me nuts. Say, I have a company with the federal government. I say, that's fantastic. Which federal government? Well, the United States federal government. But the United States federal government doesn't let you open up corporations. I could swear it's with the federal government. Let's clear one thing up right now. Corporation is an entity of the state. That means if you open up Cellular Unlimited in New York State, that is a New York State entity. You can do business in Florida, that's fine, but you better get permission from Florida to do business there. Otherwise, if you get sued or you want to sue someone, you may not be able to. I mean, you can always fix it, but if a company, you hear Delaware Corporation, it's a Delaware Corp. What do you mean Delaware Corp? That means if somebody went to the Department of State in Delaware, they filled out their certificate of filing, they faxed that form into them, they got the letter back, they went to the bank and they opened up a bank account. That's all that it means. This is not rocket science. It's very simple. It's made so that everyday normal people can do it themselves. You don't need an attorney until you make some real money. When you make some real money and you want to be able to keep more of your money, maybe that's when you start paying people to help you. How do I form an LLC? The formation of an LLC requires the filing of an article of organization with New York State's Department of State, and we have it in here, and you can look at it, and I showed everyone, it's pretty straightforward. So there are some issues between an S Corp or an LLC. A lot of times people come in and say, should I open up an LLC, should I open up an S Corporation? My accountant says I should open up an LLC. What do you think? So, there are certain minimum threshold requirements you have to worry about, and everybody should know them off the bat. There are a million, listen, the law is like math. There's so many variables, it's unlimited, and I can't cover all of them, but there are certain ones you should know off the bat when you start thinking about opening up your company. The first thing about who can form an S corporation. To open up an S corporation, you have to be a U.S. citizen or a U.S. resident. I don't know if everyone here is American citizens or not, but a lot of times you have Israelis, they have 1,000,001 LLCs. Why? Because they can't open up an S corporation. It's illegal. An S corporation is a very, very special corporation. We're going to get into why it's so special and so precious and ultimately created for wealthy people again. How many shareholders can an S corporation have? An S corporation can have a maximum of 100 shareholders, all of which have to be individuals. So you can't have a company owning company, and I don't think that's really specific, but just to keep in mind. An LLC, how many members can it have? An LLC can have unlimited members. That's why a lot of times, Amazon, for example, it's an LLC. If you look at the bottom, it's an LLC. A lot of these huge, huge corporations, why would they opt for LLC status? Why don't they opt for S corp? It doesn't make any sense. The answer is because they've got millions and millions of shareholders. There's no way they're going to be able to pull it off with an S corporation. So who owns an S corporation? It's kind of a strange thing, right? I want to open up a company. I want to do business. I'm making all this money. I'm worried that someone's going to come after me personally. So I'm going to open up this entity. It's going to be mine, but it's not going to be mine. But I'm in control of it, but it's kind of confusing. I'll be honest, it's confusing for me. Sometimes I have to sit down and think through the rhythm of logic. And basically, the general way to understand it is a corporation is owned by the shareholders. So if you have 100 shares in a corporation and there are 100 people, right, each person owns 1% of the corporation. Now, you may have a president, a CEO, and you may have a CFO and all these people, but they don't own the company. They're just officers appointed to run the day-to-day operation of the company. So the owners of an S corporation are called shareholders. The corporation issues share certificates to the shareholders in exchange for something of value like cash, services, or property. There's a master's course. You could spend years studying how exactly you get your money into a corporation, get out of a corporation. But I'm going to sum it up in 2 words. CPA, Certified Public Accountant, that's all they do all day. They train from day one. These guys, numbers. When it comes time and you have to do it, you meet with a CPA, not an accountant, not someone who is got a bachelor's of accounting, someone who has a Certified Public Accountant certificate. That means that they've done the work, they worked really, really hard, and they got a license. And that means that they know, they understand how complex it is, and generally you can trust them. How much does it cost to form an S corporation? I have $195 there. It's not really $195, it's $135. The problem is that if you want it expedited, you have to pay $50 more or $35. And on the facts cover sheet that you have in here, it does specify how much faster you can do it. So if you want to do it in 24 hours, you pay $25 for $135 plus $25. Same day would be $75. If you're trying to do it yourself, do not pay the expedite fee, because if you get it wrong, they're going to keep it. So you just fax it in, they'll fax it back, saying you made this mistake and that mistake and this mistake. I'm sure you fix all the mistakes and you fax it back then. We wait a week, but it's a lot cheaper. How much does it cost to form an LLC? Now, this is the main impediment to filing an LLC. An LLC, in theory, is a lot better in some ways. The problem with an LLC is it costs a minimum about $1,500 to start. So you're looking at the difference between $135 or $1,500. And the reason why it's so expensive is because New York State has this ridiculous requirement, almost no other state has this, that you publicize the fact that you're opening up an LLC with in newspapers in your county. So I've heard some cute little tricks that people have where they'll open up the corporation in upstate New York, where the 2 newspapers consider $50 to be like $1 million, and then they're able to transfer it down to Kings County. I don't encourage people to do that because it just seems like you're dealing with scammers. Why are you going to business with people who are already trying to play games? So I would say that's probably not a good idea. So that's one of the problems with an LLC. It's very expensive. How long does it take to form an S corporation? the New York State takes them about a week to wake up and figure out they received the fax if you don't pay for expedited service. New York State, the Department of State, that's the branch of government who's charged with opening corporations, monitoring corporations, dealing with corporations, goes the NYS, DOS, Department of State, right? We have the United States Department of State, we have also New York State Department of State. When they get a fax, if there's no expedite on it, it goes in a huge pile. So it can take up to a week for them to really grant it or deny it. If you want and you really must have the corporation tomorrow, then you pay for the expedite, $25. You get, and you'll get it right away. And you can pay it. It's not really a big deal. And LLC is the same thing. It takes approximately. It all depends on how fast you want it to be opened. Does an S corporation offer limited liability to shareholders? At the beginning, I used very sharp words. I said a corporation will provide you with real armor and protection unless you do something stupid, right? It's like not a nice word, really something stupid. Well, the problem is that it's exactly what the law is talking about. If you open up a corporation and you open up a bank account and you make $1,000, and then you go out to lunch with your friend Chaim, you say, "Hey Chaim, it's been a good week. Why don't we go to Mendy's and get food?" And you swipe it, and you two guys take corporate money, corporation's a separate entity from you, and start using it for personal purposes. You're basically saying to the courts and to the state and saying to everybody, I don't really want this to be separate from me. I want it to just be like my bank account. And the courts will say, no problem. You don't want it to be separate from you? We want to force it to be separate from you. Well, we're not going to go against you. We're not going to do something you don't want to do. So that's the problem. You can open up a corporation, an LLC. You can open up 1 million of them. But if you treat them like your personal bank account and you don't file specific rules and formalities that are necessary and required, you can end up giving up the protections that are granted by corporate law. It goes in here specifically, but there's just a few things you don't want to make a mistake. Number one is, what you don't want to do is use it as your personal, don't use your corporate account as your personal account. Number two is, I think that's really the main one. All the other ones are just, you have to keep QuickBook records of all the transactions that go on in the corporation. You have to have a system of appointing and removing officers. And these things are all formalities. They can be done in 15 minutes. But then the main one, the one that I always stress, and that is most problematic and the hardest for most people to avoid doing, is basically using their corporate entity as a personal entity, and in so doing, maybe unintentionally, relinquishing all their personal liability.
A business expense. No?
You should contact an accountant who is well versed in expenses and make sure that you are not taking expenses in excess of that amount.
And you want to throw a company party.
That would be one of the exceptions. It would have to be open to the public for it to be fully deductible. But that's another story. So, okay. I'm just going to speed up a little bit here. LLC, corporation, for purposes of what's called limited liability, it's all the same. You have to make sure not to do anything foolish. Don't do something that would make the entity not distinct and separate from you. All right, one of the things, this is getting a little bit more complicated, and I hesitate to go into it, so I'm going to go really, really quickly. If it doesn't pertain to you, don't worry about it. Basically, an S corporation, one of the major problems with an S corporation is that if I open up a corporation with you, and you put $100 into it, and I put $100 into it, we each own 50% of the corporation. So if the company tomorrow makes $100, you get $50 and I get $50. I can't give you $75. I can't say, listen, I make way more money than you. You need the money, Pasha. Take 70. I don't need the money. Take it for your family. No problem. You can't do that with an S corporation. LLCs, you can't do that. You can. And LLCs, because you can do that, are very, very attractive for very, very wealthy people. And I give you a bracha, all of you should be very wealthy and have to worry about this issue and come to me for advice about it.
What's the special protection that an S corporation gives you over an LLC?
There is no difference. For purposes of armor and protection, there's no difference between a corporation, whether we remember, for state purposes, there's no such thing really as an S corp. I mean, you can't get recognized, but it's a corporation or a limited liability corporation. But for purposes of state law, they provide the same amount of protection. It's a separate entity. You can lose all the money you put into the company. I don't want anyone to think, oh, I'm protected. So the $500 I have sitting in my bank account, when they come together, I get it back. Oh, no. Anything you put in, you relinquish your rights, like giving a gift to someone else. You put $100 into a corporation, you've gifted the corporation. You don't have to gift the corporation, but for all intents and purposes, the corporation owns your $100 now. You want to get it back? Well, you better have a real business purpose to get it back.
Can you just reiterate what you just said about an LLC? You can pay someone more than the fair share?
It's a complicated area of law, but basically
Well, tell me the name of it. I can look it up. Is there a certain...
it covers it in here.
What's it under what tab?
Can an LLC have membership interests with different economic rights?
Happened right to us.
All right, so who manages an S corporation? Who manages an LLC? S corporation, LLC have different words that we use when we talk about them, but ultimately it's all the same. More for 99% of the things. A S corporation is like the president's, it's like a corporation is very similar. The structure of operating a corporation or the management of a corporation is very similar to the way the federal government works. You have the president. You have a president of a corporation, a vice president of what's called the United States, vice president of a corporation, treasurer of a corporation. How did the president how did he get elected? Oh, well, the citizens of the United States voted him in. But who are the citizens of a corporation? The shareholders. The shareholders own the corporation. They own it in pieces, but ultimately they own the corporation. So they vote in the president. What happens if I open up an S corporation, I own all the shares? How do I become president? I vote myself in. I say, I hereby vote Yossel Bialystok to be the president of my corporation. Thank you very much, I appreciate it. Well, that's not sufficient for the law. For the law, I have to write it down. It's called the minutes. I have to write down, on this and this day, shareholder who owned 100% of the corporation voted it, and if I don't do that, when it comes time for a lawsuit, the first thing I want to see the minutes of your shareholder meeting. Show me the shareholder meeting. I want to see, show me when you got voted in. Show me who are the owners. And this is the law in New York State. You have to keep on the books, and if you don't do it, you can get in trouble. So these are also additional requirements. It's all found on Google. You Google the requirements for a New York State corporation. But again, these are formalities. They're important. You want to follow them. But ultimately, you want to make money first. That's all. You make it rain, and you can hire someone to do the rest. A LLC doesn't really have shareholders. It has members, and members then own percentages of the company. Also, I don't want to people get lost, but basically, if an S corporation had what's called two shareholders, each owning half of the corporation, and they converted it to an LLC somehow, or opened up an LLC, then you'd have two members of the LLC owning 50% share interest. It's an accounting. You let your accountant deal with it, unless you become an accountant. You let the accountant deal with it. You worry about making money, but ultimately, you just have to know there is a difference. Practically, the difference is relatively unimportant for your day-to-day operation, but there is a difference. A corporation has shareholders, just like citizens of the United States, and an LLC has members. But for all intents and purposes, ultimately, it's more or less the same. All right, so at the beginning I said there was something very wonderful about S corporations. Everybody wants an S corporation. Nobody wants a C corporation. What's so wonderful about S corporations? It's like an obsession. I want an S corporation. People come in, they don't even know what it is, but they want an S corporation. Well, what is it about an S corporation? Well, S corporations are fantastic vehicles because C corporations, other type of corporations, they're separate people from me, right? It's a separate and distinct entity. What's the problem with being a separate and distinct entity? If I earn $500, I have to pay tax on $500. If I want to give you the $500, right, I give it to you after I get it. So I pay, let's say, 10% tax. I pay $50 in tax. Now I want to pay you, so I pay you now $450, right? I just lost $50. Well, now you just got paid, so then you have to pay taxes on $450, which is, let's say, 10%, so that's $45. So you just paid $95 in tax because you're a C corporation. So to get this protection, it costs me $95. Well, it's got to be a better way to do this, right? I don't want to spend $95 in tax. So let's go to the government, let's go to the legislature, and we're going to beg the legislature to let income earned by me go straight to you. I don't have to pay taxes. That's what an S corporation is. It's a corporation that provides you with all the protections right? No one can get your personal money. Nobody can do any of that terrible stuff, evil stuff that the wealthy didn't want to happen, right? But it has the added benefit, fantastic benefit, of any money it receives, it gets to give to its shareholders, and it doesn't have to pay any personal taxes. So let's do the scenario again. I'm a C corporation. I earn $500. I pay 10% tax, $50. I give it to you. You get $450. That's all that's left over. You pay 10% tax, $45.
He's a partner in the C corporation?
No, he's a shareholder. He owns me. I'm the corporation. I'm a separate entity. I'm a separate person for legal purposes. So he just paid 45. 45 plus 50.
It's like employer.
95. Non-employee employer. Shareholder, owner. Corporation is a distinct entity. When I own a corporation, I'm creating another legal person. It doesn't exist, but for legal purposes, is completely different and distinct. So in that case, it was $95 in taxes paid. Now let's do a very simple thing. Let's apply to the federal government and to the state and say, please give me S corporation status. So 2011, there was $95 of tax paid. In 2012, I get S corporation elections. Second to last page, third to last page. I fill out this form, I sign it, I put the stamp on, I send it in. Magic! In 2012, I make $500. I take all $500 out to pay a nickel in tax. I give it straight to you. You pay 10% now. $50, $45 savings. Praise the Lord, right? And that's what everybody wants, pay less taxes. And that's ultimately the intent. An LLC has the same concept. An LLC gets money, it gives money, it doesn't have to pay taxes. It's completely considered a pass-through entity. It's almost as if it has all the protections and none of the negative repercussions that the C corporation. So now you know why corporations that are on the stock exchange, all these huge corporations, why they all are obsessed with pushing down tax rates. Why don't these S corporations care? Because C corporations only want to pay corporate tax. S corporations are pass-through entity, they don't pay a nickel. So now you know why.
As far as taxes are concerned, is an LLC different than an S corporation?
For purposes of taxes, LLCs and S corps are almost 95% the same. There are some critical differences that you have to know about when you make a lot of money. And at that time, you have a lot of money, you can spend a little bit to keep more of it. You go to an accountant, you go to a tax attorney, you go to somebody who knows a little bit about this. But for purposes of the vast majority of cases where your corporation will make $30,000 and pay out acceptable salary to its corporate officer, you the president, $30,000, the tax difference between an LLC and a S corporation will be a few dollars. We're talking about, it will be so small that the difference, maybe it's 2 or 3%, whatever is the percentage, it's relatively small, and it's not really worth worrying about it initially. Later on, when you make more money and you're concerned, and you're starting to think maybe there's ways to structure your finances. There was what's called a judge, very, very sharp judge. He was talking about tax cases. He said, the difference between tax evasion and tax avoidance. Tax evasion is where tax evasion people go to jail for. Tax avoidance is encouraged in America. So what is the difference? It's a good muscle, a good analogy. Tax evasion is deciding to take the George Washington Bridge out of New York City and not paying the tax. That's tax evasion. You get 100 miles an hour, you zoom right to the toll, you give the guy the finger, and I'm not going to pay you. They're going to pick you up, right? Tax avoidance is taking the Holland Tunnel. Guess what? The Holland Tunnel is free. Now, will anyone put you in jail for taking the Holland Tunnel instead of what's called George Washington Bridge? Of course not. It's completely illegal. So that's the thing. You want to take all steps. I know I've gone from very general to very specific, but there's a great accountant in town. His name is Yehuda Eckhouse. He does not want anyone to open up a corporation because there are some additional taxes that are incurred. And he's very against. He says, be a sole proprietor forever. He's an accountant, very good at what he does. I have a lot of respect. I send all my clients to him to get their tax returns done. But again, the limited liability issue, he doesn't really factor in because that's not really something he looks at. So that's something you have to consider. Initially, I would agree with him. Opening up a corporation, incurring additional tax for no reason is a waste. Why should the government get more of your money if you can avoid it? But if you can get something in return, remember, corporations were created for wealthy people to keep their money. Do you have any money? Why would you open up a corporation? It's like buying insurance when you have nothing to lose. I understand the concept. You don't want to file bankruptcy if you lose something. But I also understand the concept that you may not have a $1,500 or $1,000 to spend
So
now.
relative
I
to
know
what
this is a
industry
very
you're in.
litigious society, and you have to protect yourself if you're making any kind of money and you're investing tens of thousands, and you could lose it like that overnight if you're not protected.
Well said. That was very well. Yeah, I can't disagree with that.
But if you put the LLC, you don't have to pay an extra $45. Remember you said that?
Oh, LLC, opening up an LLC is very expensive
Right,
initially.
just to open it. But
It's
otherwise,
$1,500.
Once you have it, is there a difference though?
There are what's called maybe slightly. It's very slight. The difference is very, very slight. But again, it really makes no difference in the scenario where, again, your corporation's only making $50,000. It's paying all of its money out to the what's called the president. It only becomes an issue when the corporation makes so much money that now it has more money than its expenses. So now, with that extra income, right? If I get $500 and I give him $450, before I have to give him $450, I have an obligation under the law to pay all my expenses. I have to pay my rent bill. I have to pay my utility bill. I have to pay, guess who? My employees. So if at the end of the year I don't have any money, I don't have to pay any taxes. So I get $500. If I end up spending $500 to pay him as an employee, there's not going to be any taxes. So that's why these issues are important.
If you want to get more money out of it, you just raise the salary of yourself.
It can get problematic. You're correct. It can get problematic where your company's making $1 million and you're, the CEO, and you're paying yourself $1 million. And everybody else in your industry is paying their CEOs $250,000. The IRS is going to come and say, "Hold on a second. This is a game of tax evasion." And of course, tax attorneys are going to get in front of the judge and say, "You're running. This is tax avoidance. It's illegal."
You're paying all the taxes.
What I'm saying is it gets complicated. I'm not here. I could write. Literally, there are books. It doesn't end. And in the books, there's books written on the books. I'm just trying to explain that if you make money, you have what to lose. There are certain steps. The difference between the steps, I just want you to understand. S corporate, LLC, it's relatively slim initially. Later on, it might get bigger. You may have to move things around, but initially, I don't think the expense is worthwhile. That's just my personal opinion.
You can change it later.
You can open up a new corporation later.
This may jump ahead, but you can explain a little bit about how to file differently and some of the steps how the structure is a little different between an LLC and that corporation, but I still have
Filing for taxes purposes?
No, as far as opening one up.
Well, we have everything right here. No
I
problem.
understand, but I'm still not clear on what are the benefits and risks of each, and why would I choose one over the other?
Okay, we'll get into. I'll try to go into. There are some self-employment tax issues on LLCs. 15.3% has to be paid for the first $106,000. With S corporations, again, this is, you can read it. I'm not going to get into it. There is a difference, and that's why there's pros and cons. And at the end of this, we're going to go through the pros and cons. All right, let's just go to the last page. Bottom line for S corporations. This is just going to sum it up real quickly. An S corporation is cheaper to form than an LLC, much cheaper, $135. More people are familiar with the structure of an S corporation because you understand how the federal government works, you understand the president. S corporation is easy to understand and conceptualize. Self-employment taxes may result in savings through an S corporation versus an LLC. Some of the cons. S corporations put serious limitation on the number and kind of permitted shareholders. You can only have, a limited number. That may or may not be an issue. Special allocations. S corporations. Special allocation is a fancy way of saying that I can give more income to one partner or to one person over the next person. That cannot be permitted in an S corporation. And Svi and I were good friends, and I debate this with him, and there's really no right answer as what's called what to do. It's really about the individuals. Like you said, it's your personal preference. What I'm just trying to do is inform you.
No, but I have a question. If you have two partners, one manages a business, so in theory you should get another 10% for managing the business.
That would be a salary. S corporations require ongoing formalities to preserve their limited liability sheet. You have to do a little bit more with an S corp. You have to meet. You have to talk to yourself a little more often initially. You have to do some stuff. When you talk to an attorney, it doesn't cost much. You just follow the formalities, but it's important to do them. Very simple. 1 day, 2 hours, whole year. S corporation status is now recognized by New York City. It's a big problem. There's a big tax in New York City on S corporations. So you end up paying 10% tax on the profit. So just to do a quick analogy, I have a corporation. I'm an S Corp, I receive $1,000. I paid all my expenses. I paid rent, I paid my salaries, I paid all the necessary and ordinary expenses of operating a business, and I'm still left with $1,000. I got to give it to someone. Who do I have to give it to? It has to go to the shareholders, so it goes to you. Well, the federal government says I don't exist. The state says more or less I don't exist. There is one tax, which is it's very small. But New York City says you made it in New York City. You were in the money in New York City while you were in New York City. Okay, now you have to pay about 10% tax on it. So you're going to have to pay $100 to the federal government, to New York City, and when you file your taxes, you'll have to pay it. So that's something you have to watch out for an S corporation. LLCs. The pros of an LLC. Just before I go forward, but just change that fact pattern a tiny bit. The corporation earns $10,000. It pays the employee $10,000. It didn't make any money. Of course, it's not going to have to pay New York State any money. It only makes money on its profits, right? For an individual, profits are very easy to figure out. Whatever's in my pocket, huh? Because if it ain't in my pocket, it ain't profit, right? It went to him. With the corporation, it's a little more complicated because also you have all these expenses. But ultimately, if it's an ordinary necessary expense, that's the key word. Ordinary necessary expense of operating your type of business. If it's, buying material, buying sheets, whatever it is.
Paying yourself considered an expense?
Yes.
You're an employee of the company.
Right. The corporation has an obligation to pay all its necessary and ordinary expenses. Employees who work for the corporation, they are creditors. They are owed money to the corporation. The corporation has to pay. Everyone accepts you have to pay your employees. How much? What's too much? What's too little? That's you can litigate it for a year. LLCs are a little bit more flexible when it comes to giving income or losses and stuff like that. You can have unlimited owners. Doesn't matter if they're foreigners or not foreigners. You don't have to do much in the way of formalities with an LLC. You meet with the attorney and say for 2 hours, you meet with them for 15 minutes. LLCs are very expensive to form. That's a bad thing. They're expensive to maintain because the accountant has to spend a lot more time figuring out how to allocate everything. And that's a master's class in itself. But a good accountant, like I said, a CPA can really help you make it a lot easier to deal with that issue.
If you're self-employed, does that cut down all the confusion as far as the complexity?
It does, definitely does, yeah. The self-employment taxes can be a little bit higher with LLCs than with S corporations. So you may have to pay more to the federal government with LLC, but you don't have to pay to New York State. Whereas in S corp, you have to pay to New York State. You don't have to pay to the federal government. But again, this is all the profit made by the entity. All right, so the next pages, I'm just going to name them. You can write it down. This is a fax filing sheet. You want to fax something to New York State, you fax it in. The fax number's on Google. Google's your friend. Type in New York State fax filing number, New York State Department of State. Just fill it out, type it in, it's fillable. Certificate of incorporation. This is for a business corporation. Fillable form, you'll find it online. Google. Next one is limited liability corporation. This is a DBA. You can call Sviak House and ask him what he thinks. Don't take my word for it. Again, I'm not really giving legal advice here. I'm doing a workshop with general knowledge. What's the right thing to do? DBA is definitely an option. Assume name. If you're a corporation and you open up Cellular Unlimited, well, under this New York State, you open up a corporation for all permissible purposes. So if you decide after selling 1 million cell phones, I should start developing property, no problem. But it's like a small issue. Now you're going to put up a big building and it's going to be called Cellular Unlimited. Oh my God! Everyone's going to think that your building is a cellular tower. You don't want that. So what do? Well, you can file something called an assumed name. You can say Building Unlimited, Inc. And depending on the county, it costs a certain amount of money. The max is $1,950.
Wait, assume name under your already LLC?
This is assumed name specifically for
Let's say you already
corporations.
have an LLC.
And you want to open up a assumed
Something
name?
a completely different business? I'm not.
Just a different name. I want a different moniker. I don't like what's called Cellular Unlimited.
But what if you have a different branch? Like what if you expand and you're doing a different type of service, but it's still under
So you
your-
can get an assumed name. And this is the form right here. It's very easy to file. Again, the fax filing sheet works for all of these. You can do it yourself. I can do some samples, maybe email them out. All right, next page, EIN. All right, so let's just back up for a second because I know we went very quickly, very fast. But I open up a corporation, I fax into the what's called Secretary of State, I get back a filing receipt. It's a little letter, it's got a stamp from what's called the New York State, right? It says, filed, corporation, all the information. Okay, where do I go now? What do I do? So the answer is, you want to open a bank account, don't you? You want to be able to start operating your business. You want to be able to write checks, accept checks. You want to be able to keep a QuickBooks account of all the ongoing activity, right? Well, how do I open up a bank account? Well, the way you open up a bank account is you have to go onto the IRS. Again, Google IRS online EIN number. You can apply online. 99% of the time it'll work. You don't have to call them. You just fill out the information. If you're an S Corp, you click S Corp. You describe what the business is. You type in your social security number. At the end of it, instantaneously, it'll print an SS-4. It's basically a form with your EIN number, with your name on it and your corporation's name. You print that out. I have the fax filing letter from New York State. I've got the EIN letter that I print out. I'm holding the two together. I've got the original articles of incorporation. Staple them all together. I walk up to Bank of America. I hand it to the person, and they open up my account right there, no problem.
Do you need EIN for sole proprietorship?
You can get one, but you don't necessarily need it. No, not all banks will require it. 2553 form, S Corporation election. You didn't open up an LLC. It was too expensive. You don't have $1,800 to throw out the window. You're not sure, but you're sure you want to open up a company. You must have a company, and you're not willing to just take a chance. So what do? I file 2553. I fill out the information, call the IRS if you have questions. You don't need, again, to hire an accountant or attorney. You don't need that. You send it in. Comes back 3-4 weeks, maybe 2 months. You're going to get a letter saying recognition as S Corporation says. I have this letter. I got it. I'm so happy. I'm excited. Now I know my corporation will never pay a nickel to the federal government. State, slightly. In New York City, we know we will, right? But we know to the federal government, we're not going to pay a nickel in tax. What do I do then? Well, CT6. CT6 says you want New York State to recognize you as a S Corporation. You have to now file recognition with New York State. Fill out CT6. Call them if you have any questions. Very easy to do. Why is it that we did it in this particular order? Because New York State will not recognize you as an S Corporation until you have a copy of your federal recognition. So you have to wait. You have to put this on top of your desk and not let go of it. If I had a case where a client waited 24 months and he got a letter from the state basically saying, you filed your tax return, thank you very much. Oh, by the way, you're a C Corp as far as we're concerned. If you think you're not a C Corp, send us some proof otherwise. I sent in a copy of the federal, faxed it in with a copy of the letter. 2 weeks ago, we got a letter saying, okay, we're going to recognize you as an S Corp. So they're not mamzerim, they're going to recognize, but you want to try not to forget to do it. I went a million miles an hour, and I want to apologize if I confuse anyone. I just hope that some of the simple things, you know a little bit better. Your intuition is your power when it comes to these things. Just think how it should be, and 99% of the time it is exactly that way. Now just think what's the right thing under the circumstances. So, if you think logically, very few times will the law be absurd and be completely, contrary to logical rhythms. So anyone have any questions?
Many. Could you just give an example of someone who's at the point where, let's say, you would approach him and say, hey, this is what I do for a living. I think you're at the time where you really need to.
All right, so the scenario that I mostly tell people right away you have to open up a corporation is where a person has some money in the bank. They've got, let's say, $30,000, $40,000, and think about opening a company. They're really not sure it'll work or it won't work, and they think about maybe hiring someone. They think about maybe taking. In that case, I think it's really imperative to open up a corporation. And the reason why is because when you open up a corporation, you hire someone, you could not believe the amount of responsibilities that fall on your head. You have to pay disability. You have to pay unemployment. You have to pay payroll taxes. You have to remit to the federal government. And as a sole proprietor, it's kind of hard to go to a payroll company and get it set up. Some payroll companies will work with you, but it's much easier to call. There's a company called BDB Payroll. They're very, very good. Fantastic. You call up, you give them your EIN number, you tell them how much you want to pay the person, they take care of everything. So in a case like that, where you have some assets, you don't have to have 100,000 or more, but you have some assets, and you're about to take a real undertaking. You're going to hire someone. You're going to do something that requires. It's just not you. It's just not you. You're not alone in a room anymore making money. Now you got other people involved. Then you want to do it right.
Maybe my question would be,
Not if they're part-time.
yeah, so let's say you're hiring someone part-time in cash. So you're only hiring,
Yeah.
like,
This kind of, and I was
it's not
thinking,
hiring, it's just
right.
like, it's an expense for today's event.
Right, this was a subject I wanted to get into, but there was no way to do it. I'll just tell you a quick warning. The economy is down, the government is looking for money. A lot of the stuff that used to pass by them and they didn't even care about, they're starting to care about. You would not believe the insanity that they create, that they can really make your life harder. What do I mean? You have this corporation because you don't want to worry about personal liability. But the law is not a solid wall, it's Swiss cheese. All right, maybe this part of the wall is solid, but if you go enough to that side, you'll find Swiss cheese. And what do I mean? That you have complete protection, except if you violate a labor law, except if you fail to keep unemployment insurance. The law is on both sides. If you go around saying you're a corporation and you're not, that's a misdemeanor. They're going to have you arrested. They're going to charge you with a misdemeanor. If you open up a corporation and you choose not to keep what's called unemployment insurance or not to pay unemployment or not to get disability, well, that's also a misdemeanor. So it kind of is. I know it's a little bit crazy, and that's why it is a good idea to have an accountant, an attorney to work with when you start making some real money. But at the initial phase, you really have to weigh these two things. And I definitely think opening up a corporation is a good idea for a lot of people. And I think for other people, it'd be a mistake. I had a guy call me up. He said, "I got a great idea. I'm going to buy this building. How am I going to put a corporation?" And I said, let's just give it 30 days. Come back to me. See how it's going. 30 days later, thank God he's on to the next deal. And if he would open up this corporation, to close a corporation with New York State is quite a process. You have to file a tax return. You have to check being the last tax return. Then you have to file a certificate of dissolution. You have to make sure to make all your what's called your outstanding payments. I mean, it's kind of an undertaking. It's not a game. So I want to give you two warnings. One is be very careful in choosing not to open a corporation. But if you open a corporation, be very, very careful too, because it's kind of there's kind of danger on both sides, right? And you have to be. Just don't this idea that I'm going to do part-time, I'll hire a guy, I'll come in, I'll pay him a few bucks, and he slips and he hurts his arm. And then he goes to the hospital, and they say, well, I was working for, this guy. Well, all of a sudden, Department of Labor gets a call. We've got a case of somebody employing somebody without disability, without unemployment, misdemeanor issue. Department of Labor sends out a letter. And it can spiral out of control. And that's why not opening up a corporation is a gamble, to be honest. And opening up a corporation is a gamble also. But it's, again, if you use your logic, you don't do anything stupid, and you act responsibly, and you don't play games, you can avoid 95% of the issues.
Quick question, because if I open up a DBA and I get personal liability, in theory, isn't that my good armor?
Well, DBA is the same thing as doing business as an individual.
That's myself. So my whole entire concern was, just in case something screws up, I go ahead and protect myself. So for the ever amount of dollars I can get my liability and under my corporation and under my entity, and then I can have my shield armor around me without having the additional taxes and all the headaches and all the different ins and outs.
The DBA provides zero protection.
True, but my liability that I'm insurance I'm going to buy for myself just in case something that happens.
And that's the argument that Sviak House, he's a fantastic accountant, the guy's brilliant, and he says, listen, there's no need to ask for the government, there's no need to give the government your money. And he's right, but under certain cases, you don't want to be a DBA anymore. You buy a home, you put 10% down, 15% down, put $100,000 on a home, and you're running your business, and you start borrowing money, you do different stuff like that, it all of a sudden becomes a little bit dangerous. You're kind of gambling your life. So then a corporation probably is your best bet. And then you have to be careful when you open a corporation not to engage in a business venture that you would be personally liable on. In a way, this kind of is like a lot of hot air. Because to be honest, none of us have got $1 million, right? That's true. That is true. But no business makes $1 million overnight. Every business kind of starts slow. And it's a roller coaster, like I said at the beginning. You make some money, things are slow. You make a little bit more money, things are slow. You don't really know, at the end of the year you look back and you say, wow, I actually made that much money, but where is it? That's the number one reason people say they don't understand where the money went. I see I made $40,000, but I have no idea where my money is. It's, so kind of, you now have a little bit more information. You don't know everything, right? And there's no way to know everything, but now you understand a little bit of why people do what they do. And, you kind of know what to think about when you get, different situations, your approach with different situations. I would love to say Lubavitchers don't have these issues, but let me tell you, Lubavitchers come into my office every day, and they have partners who cheat them, poor Lubavitch, and they have, they're getting sued from the Department of Labor, who are, but what I'm saying is that we're not immune. We're living in a country, Dina Machusadina, and it's best to be able to protect yourself if you can.
What do you need in order to file taxes? What do you need to keep track? How they count them, what information?
Very good question. That is an amazing question, and we're almost out of time, so I'll say very, very simple. You need to learn how to use QuickBooks. If you could take one thing away from this whole hour of speaking, if you could take one thing, that is, I must learn how to use QuickBooks. It's more important than anything else. Why? Because you don't know if you made profit or if you have a loss. You have no idea what you did or what you didn't do. You don't know where your money went. You don't know whether or not, you made a mistake. There's no way to know what happened. You're kind of just be confused. If you learn how to use QuickBooks, it's not that hard. Go to Amazon.com, QuickBooks for Dummies. When I went to yeshiva, when I went to college, I didn't know how to use a computer. I had to teach myself how to use a computer. I was there when I went. I understand it's very, very hard, but if you want to be an entrepreneur and you want a business, the number one thing people tell me, guys who are 35 or 40, who have businesses making a lot of money, who lost 5 businesses, gained 5, all of them say, I wish I would have learned how to use QuickBooks l'chatchila. If I had only known, I would have known that I was losing. I would have known I was making. It was just a big joke. Every Lubavitch guy I met, which is kind of funny, who was successful, they're all experts at QuickBooks. You would never believe it. These guys are mumchas. They're better than accountants. Why? Because they learn the hard way. They open up a company, they start making money, they start making payments, they think they're making money, they find out they have no money, they find out they borrowed money, they owe money, they don't know where. There's no way to do business. And that's the number one problem. And Lubavitchers b'chlal, we're given a lot of koiches because we go out, we speak to people, we're very extroverted. You have to learn how to use QuickBooks. You want to be an entrepreneur, you want to make money, you want to be worth anything in this world, you have to know on a day-to-day business, minute by minute, you have to know what's going on with your business. The only way you're going to be able to do that is if you're an expert at QuickBooks. There are other programs, but it's the easiest one. So learn QuickBooks. Go to Amazon.com. I don't care if you want to make money tutoring or you want to open up a catering company. It doesn't matter what it is, you have to know what's going on with your finances. At Amazon.com, type in QuickBooks for Dummies, buy the program, buy the old program, install on your computer. It's very confusing initially. It's very hard to understand why it all comes together. I have books in my office called Accounting for Dummies. You're more than welcome to come and borrow them. You can read them as long as you return them. And you have to understand. So QuickBooks would be the number one, if you want to be an entrepreneur, the number one thing you need to learn. It's more important than anything else, except of course making money in your business. But after that, it's number one.
But legally, you legally have to keep track of everything like QuickBooks.
If you're a corporation, number one, if you look at the law, first thing, you have to know exactly what's going on. You have to keep exact records. Why? Why? No, but why? Why do you think they want it? Because the first thing they ask in a lawsuit, the first thing they ask in the federal government, produce your records. 6 years, we want to see every single transaction. How are you going to do that?
You show Excel records?
People use Excel, and there's some mumchas in Excel, and it seems like you may be experienced. Excel is not bad. I know my wife worked with an accountant who was a firm guy who could make Excel sing. Excel's a great product.
Is it legally viable?
Anything which is complete is legally viable, but don't trust me.
No,
learn QuickBooks. You're better off learning QuickBooks.
What happens if you lose your receipts?
Yeah, I wanted to know how far back, when you have expenses, and then you start making a profit, how far back do you count those expenses?
Talk to your accountant. Do you have an accountant, a certified public accountant? Tzvi Eckhouse. He doesn't know, by the way, I name him, but he's helped me so much. He doesn't give me a nickel either. He's a Lubavitch guy. He works, what's called full-time job, and in the evening people come to him, he charges them a lot less. It's very menschlich. You give him a call, and he'll tell you about net operating losses, carry forwards, look backs, and really.
If you lose your receipts, you file taxes, and the IRS decides that what you filed to them is inaccurate. They want to go ahead and charge you more or less. So what do you do in such a situation?
Well, this is the scenario. I'll rephrase it, where a guy gets a letter from the IRS and says, "We want to look at all your books." He says, "Oh, I'm so happy. You want to look at them? Come on down. Come down. Here they are." They look through. They say, "Well, we're missing." So for the life of me, I do not know where I put that box. So the auditor says, "I understand you lost it. Nothing personal, but we're just going to charge you $50,000 in tax, and we'll call it even." What do you do in such a scenario like that? There are different things you can do. One is your bank records are going to be a really good reflection of what happened. Another thing is good old-fashioned auditing yourself, going back and doing forensic audit, finding out who your vendors are. There's no easy answer to that question.
Use a credit card and everything is.
Credit card's a great way to do it, right? Everything's marked down. You have proof of everything, and that's a great way to do it. But again, back to really the QuickBooks thing. Your two best friends are QuickBooks, right, and a scanner. Convert everything to electronic, and in a second you can go for $250 all day. Just scan, shred, scan, shred. You'll have an electronic. There's something called carbonite.com. Fantastic. Everything backed up. You can never lose it. It does it automatically. You don't have to do anything. You just download the program. You spend the $49. All your records will be uploaded. Permanent record. Someone calls you up and says, "I need this and this and this and this." You can get it in 2 seconds and email it to them. Everything PDF.
You're not a corporation. You still have to, if you're a sole proprietorship, you still have to have the QuickBooks.
That's the Gordian knot. That's the question that there is no answer to. Legally, you can't be punished for not keeping records as an individual, right? So if a person gets sued in their corporation, they don't have the record. What do you mean you don't have the records? Chutzpah, personal liability. Then your attorney's trying to defend you. No personal liability. This is not intentional. Who knows if you'll win? You're an individual. They can't really say you had an obligation. Now, well, it's personal liability anyways. Stuff like that. So the answer is no. But for tax purposes, there's no difference. You still have to have QuickBooks records, because if you ever get audited, they're going to go back 3 years automatically. They want to go back 6 years. When the auditor walks in the door, in the back of their mind, there's one thing they want. They want to look at the last 6 years of records. In fact, they'd like to go back the last 100 years of records. How do they be able to do it? Well, they normally go back 3 years initially, but if they can prove that there was unreported income, a lot of unreported income, then they can create a presumption of an issue, and that presumption will allow them to expand it to 6 years. And if they can get it at 6 years, they can show there's a presumption of fraud, then they can unlimited auditing. So you could protect yourself very easily, keep careful. I mean, the problem is a lot of people are in business, and then start a QuickBooks record is almost impossible to import all the old information. I understand that. There maybe is a way to make a clean break. You'd have to really talk to someone who's an expert with QuickBooks, who can kind of show you how to start from the beginning, start a new bank account, maybe start a corporation. It all depends,
So, follow-on question: if you have an idea and you want to start something, how do you go about it? So if the first guy who has $30,000 and they want to start something new.
You have an idea. You want to know if you can make money off of it. There's really no easy answer, and there's no one way businesses are successful. You could have a business, personal service corporation, helping people with, personal health.
You're going to say, if you have a service, you're fresh out of yeshiva and you have a service business, so you're not going to start the first, you'll keep them in QuickBooks from the first day, but when will you say, hey, now I'm going to be an S corporation, or when will I take the next step?
I think it's time to take the next step when you start in the back of your mind thinking, gosh, I worked really hard to get this money in my bank. I don't want anyone to have it. And just the idea that all my years of work, all this money, because you have personal liability.
So they're going to come through.
Right, they can come personally. So, but again, there's no easy answer to that question. It's not like, okay, today's the day. Now I know I must open up a corporation. Because you really have to sit down and say, hold on a second, there's going to be additional taxes I'm going to incur. There's additional reporting requirements. Bialystok showed me that all I have to do is file this in this form. I have it right here. It's going to cost me $135 to open up a corporation. Yes, I know it's easy to do it, but is it the right idea? And there's no easy answer for that. You really have to sit down. Listen, if there was an easy answer to these questions, that no accountants, no attorneys would exist, right? Because there would be the way you have to do it. Everyone does it. It doesn't exist that way. Listen, I would love to do another what's called workshop, maybe in a few months, whatever it is. You can always email me. You have my email address. You can contact the organization, whatever it is. If I can help in any way, I just say this thing before we finish. There's the short, long road and the long, short road. Going to college and getting a job, depending on how many years, could be the short, long road or the long, short road. I don't know. Opening up a business is always going to be the long, short road if it gets you to your destination. Nobody's going to open up a business and say, this was like the easiest thing I've ever done. My God. Everyone should be rich, just like me. No one's ever done that. It doesn't work that way. Life doesn't work that way. Even if you're successful today, in a year, we don't know where the market's going to be. Life's ups and downs. But I really ultimately believe that as Lubavitchers, we were given, if anything, that is the ability to overcome the obstacles, because we started out in such a low place. So it was only going up. So to be honest, you have to make it rain. All this is second. It's all minutia. It's all unimportant. You have to find a business model that works. You have to keep trying stuff. If you find something that works, then you worry about this stuff. You start making some real money. You want to expand. I'll give you 45 minutes. You come in. I'll show you where to sign everything. I won't charge you. You meet with an accountant. You can talk to what's called CHYE. He'll give you 20, 30 minutes of his time too. He's not going to charge you. Everybody wants to help in life. Everyone wants to help Bachim. Everyone wants to help everyone. There is no easy answers. I do wish you guys a fantastic upcoming year, and you should use this to help other people and help other people. That's great.